Welcome back to Side Quests, episode 024, Final Fantasy VII, episode, I believe, 12, though I sometimes get that wrong. And back with me is my esteemed colleague, Mr. Wes Schantz. Welcome back, Mr. Wes Schantz.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. I, again, sort of have a strange voice, and, well, I hope it sounds good to the listeners, and maybe it's more appropriate to our nighttime theme. I maybe have
That's
a
right.
nighttime jazz DJ voice. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so this time around, I finally finished getting Vincent and seeing Sephiroth and reading about myself in that Shinra lab, or down in Dr. Gas library, rather, which I remember thinking that it looked like there were so many books there. And it's funny, now that I'm surrounded by so many more books than I see even in the Shinra mansion, and I know from being at your home during your wedding that you have even more books than I do on hand, that it's sort of funny how what was once magnified and seen as like a huge amount and massive is now sort of, we have now gone beyond that, in the same way that Cloud will eventually go beyond the magnificent strength of Sephiroth that we first witnessed at Mount Nibble, or Mount Nibelheim, where he could do like 7,000 damage or 3,000 damage with a hit, but you'll eventually do like 9,999 damage and be able to do things like W summon Knights in the Round,
Right.
which
Right.
will effectively make Sephiroth at the end practically nothing to you, which is, I think, sort of interesting as well. How much stronger than the final boss you will eventually get. Not to get too ahead of myself, but in any case, yeah.
Well, yeah, and all the books down there too, they're all sort of like strewn about, and like piled up, and it's dark down there. And you do sort of read about yourself, but you don't know yet exactly what the implications of that are. It's not like it names you, does it?
No, just your research subject B.
Uh-huh.
And I
Uh-huh.
think it says something like ordinary human or common human, and the first one, A, is a soldier or ex-soldier.
Ah.
And you're having a reaction to the Jenova cells, and you've escaped, but it doesn't matter because your consciousness is experiencing diminution. It's diminishing. And you are also reported to be reacting to the Jenova cells, whereas the first one is not. And so I wondered what that meant, that Cloud is reacting to the Jenova cells, and that is making his consciousness diminish. And that is not what happened to Zack.
Right.
He did not have a reaction. His consciousness did not diminish, and he was a soldier.
Well, it's interesting how much, you can infer that it's Cloud and Zack that it's talking about. And I think you can only do that in hindsight, really,
Right.
once you've got more of the story. But I think even if you know nothing else than what you've seen so far in the game, I think there is enough evidence there that you are one of those two subjects, that you being Cloud, right? There's enough kind of hints and enough sort of like economy of the story as well. It's like nothing you're reading in those books is going to be like totally unrelated to the Cloud backstory sort of part of the game that you're in. So I think, you can start to kind of piece it together there. And especially since, like, if you do go and talk to Vincent, he tells you a little bit about Sephiroth's background. You should already sort of be thinking along those lines. And so, it seems pretty creepy that Sephiroth is revealed to be like the calamity from the skies, right? And in the same moment, you're getting the sense that maybe Cloud has been experimented with as well. That's sort of behind his memory loss and all this weirdness with his stories that he tells.
Yeah, and just connected to the fact that Sephiroth asks you whether you're coming to the reunion after you've seen all these dark figures, like dark aspects of your memory, like welling up within your past town, which doesn't remember you, in which you were called a liar by multiple people. And it's like you are one of those shadowy defects, and that's what he sees you as. What's interesting is that he even says you might not be worthy. When you ask, was Jenova not an ancient? What do you mean calamity from the sky? That Jenova is going to become a calamity with the sky and then merge with the reunion, right? She's going to be at the reunion, and then she's going to merge and follow him if you want to go there. And he's going north. So right after he tells you you might not be worthy, he says, follow him. And then you meet Vincent, who's a literal vampire surrounded by skulls and is sleeping in a coffin and has this connection to Sephiroth. And things are just taking a dark turn. And Lucrecia, a beautiful woman, was his mother, Sephiroth's mother, which seems to disagree with Cloud's current theory that Sephiroth is 5 years old. Unless, he did some sort of crazy rapid growth or something. But, and it seems like this Vincent guy, this guy so close to someone you might imagine to be named Valentine, is in love with her. And I do think we'll get the pleasure, if we look closely enough, of seeing her at some point.
Yeah, right. Vincent's an interesting character. Yeah, he's like a vampire, closely associated with death and with like missed opportunities and regrets and all that. But his weapon is a gun, kind of like Barrett, right? But his are, of course, not like attached to him. Instead, his physical, like, I don't know what you'd call it, just like his transformations, instead of being related to machinery, are related to like monsters. So whenever he gets his limit break, he turns into basically a monster, a demon of some kind, and you actually lose control of him. I think for the remainder of the fight, unless maybe he gets killed. He gets really powerful, and he does really like effective attacks depending on what kind of enemies you're fighting. But like, so as soon as you go up into the mountains, there's some enemies that are strong against fire attacks. And one of the things that his avatar will do is a fire attack. So you'll end up like healing your enemies if you don't have him under control, which I think is pretty interesting. Like, I feel like that must have been intentional, that it worked out that way.
Yeah, and especially sort of because we were talking in the pre-show about how the game, the challenges and the puzzles and the errors you can make in the puzzles are becoming more dangerous, and the game is getting more sophisticated. It's requiring a more attentive manner of playing, because I was talking about taking sort of a wrong path or a faux path and going all the way down into the Nibelheim reactor, in which there was nothing, then going down all the way through that materia cave, and then going all the way down that path until I got to a light spot that was not the end of the path, and I had to go all the way back. And during that time, all the way back, in one of those little Mako caves, I ran into a green dragon. Those damn things, the first hit took like 1,600 damage and killed one of my guys. I was on the run. They are tough, and I know I was supposed to steal a gold bangle from them because I just now used a strategy guide to see how far back I had to run, which was an ungodly far amount. But I was running out of materia, and this opponent was way too strong for me, though I did learn Flamethrower for enemy skill, and I did just learn Triumph for Materia Keeper, so that was really cool because that's a very powerful attack. And it's a very interesting representation. It's like sort of a tetrahedron or a cube or something that just sort of like rotates about you. So it's like Quake or Demi mixed together. It's like a manipulation attack that hits everybody very powerfully. But in any case, like the game, I was down to like 0 MP with everybody, and I had to use the much coveted ether twice on 2 different characters.
Dang.
And I was really hitting my limit. And the limit of my patience. And I was actually starting sort of to feel a little panic because I wanted to get to the podcast, but I couldn't foresee a save point. And I knew a boss was now coming because I looked at a strategy guide, which really does offer so much. And I would highly recommend it to anybody. Just don't use it as gospel, because all the good advice it gave about fighting Materia Keeper, like casting Big Guard or using healing wind. I took none of it and still beat him. But I do think that would have been excellent to have done, but I haven't acquired Big Guard yet. I haven't gone back and fought against somebody who has that. But if you're the sort of person who, wants wants to use the very best strategy and wants to get everything that can be gotten, I think a strategy guide is a good idea. I sort of am neglecting it, but I know that I'm missing a lot because of it.
It's weird because you can't rely on it to fully explore the game. Like you said, like the way you actually explore the game fully is by doing it and making what you might call mistakes from the point of view of like efficiency. But even if you don't get anything by going into the reactor, it is still like you still get that like feeling of wonder and exploration. And a little bit, I think frustration seems right to me. Like, I think the game is kind of messing with you at that point. Like, you would fully expect there to be some kind of story point to do with going back to this incredibly important juncture in the story where everyone's memory like runs out, right? Like, what happened in the reactor? Fully expecting to see something of that scene come back to you by going to the scene of the crime, right? And nothing, right? You can't access any of the little chambers. You get absolutely no items or like anything. There's no dialogue. Like there's no one to talk to there.
No random encounters.
It's super duper weird, yeah. And I wonder, how much frustration is the intent and how much just like uncertainty. Like that brooding sense, like, is there somebody around the next corner kind of thing. It's like a horror movie almost. And the fact that it's not resolved makes it that much creepier in a way.
There is that feeling. And I did want to comment on what you said about Vince and his propensity to go out of control and cast fire attacks on fire, healing elemental creatures. Where I do think that is the game teaching you that just because you have this new toy doesn't mean it's going to necessarily be super powerful and you're going to use it to kill everybody. Like, it's sort of a reminder that you still need to play the game right. It's nice to have a new character, but this new character is not going to be like some sort of pan savior for you. And in fact, can be quite a liability if you're not playing the game correctly, or if you're over-relying on him. Though I will say that some of the enemy skills I feel are sort of a reward against that. Like the fact that you can acquire flamethrower and trine in this area. Trine is super powerful, and it affects all your enemies. And I haven't acquired beta yet, but how powerful is beta for you, too?
Well, it's useful, right? But it's also a fire type attack. So if you've been relying on beta, thinking you're really cool, then you come to this part where you're fighting a dragon. You're like, oh, I'm gonna just like destroy this dragon with beta, and then nope, not so much, because it just heals it by like 1,500 or something like that. So not such a great strategy to just rely on like one thing. Essentially, that's part of why enemy skill is such a useful materia, though, because it's like in one materia slot, it gives you all these different spells that you can cast, which is cool. And it doesn't affect your stats, which is also pretty cool. So you can have like a pretty balanced character who's not getting like big boosts of MP and big decreases of strength. And yet they have all these spells at their disposal as long as you've got some MP, because a lot of those spells do cost a high amount of MP. So it's a little bit like, I think to fight the green dragons and steal gold armlets or whatever from them, like it's almost like you would be stronger than you needed to be able to do that. To even like, you don't even really need the gold armor at that point. It's just a status thing. It's just to be like, yeah, I can do this thing. That's kind of a challenge. And mythologically as well, it's kind of interesting that the dragon is what you steal the gold from. Like, that's kind of cool. And I think that was Sephiroth's armor that he was wearing at this point in the game. So, he's like that elite player, so to speak, who's got the gold armlet. But yeah, like the dragons are just dangerous. You will definitely have your head handed to you if you're not like in tip-top form when you come across one of those. They're definitely the most difficult random encounter aside from the Midgar serpent up to this point.
Yeah, they're like a boss battle in of themselves. And you learn flamethrower from them, which it's interesting mythologically. So, you steal the gold from the dragon. And that's sort of like, I don't know, acquiring the potency from the image of Sephiroth, which he once embodied that you now wish to embody, as walking the path of the hero that he once walked for you, but no longer does, now being the antagonist, taking the path of Cain. We also learned flamethrower, which reminds me sort of Dante's Inferno in Canto 26, when you encounter Ulysses and Diomedes in the flames, the deceitful counselors.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be a connection between fire and not only consciousness, but language. Like, language is that which you use to, like, burn or scrawl a message. So just like sort of fire or you see something in the fire, so do you see something in the language of somebody else, a representation. So it's almost like I don't know, like the true gold that you get from him is the capacity to articulate yourself better, or to articulate yourself honestly, or to see yourself honestly, so you can burn away the dead wood of the old past habits that no longer serve you, or something like that.
Oh yeah. But then again, like, if you try to use it right away, it's not immediately effective, right? It's not gonna harm the materia keeper either, because I think he also absorbs fire attacks,
Yes.
which are sort of like generally your strongest spells at this point. So it's interesting. You have to be sort of patient. You have to be sort of canny about using your new toys, as you put it, or primarily at this point, dealing with maybe a little bit of frustration or angst, and burning away those ill feelings, and just like you say, from time to time, enjoying the experience of exploring. It's creepy, but it's also a really beautiful setting. There's that materia cave where, if you go back through it, in the meantime, in those years that have intervened, materia has formed a crystal, and I think it's an elemental. It's like one of the blue ones, I think. So it's
that with fire.
Yeah, right. It's making you sort of think along those lines, right? Like, how can I strategize best? It's not immediately obvious how to use that materia, but it is a super useful one. It's super versatile. Once you kind of.
That's interesting. You're making me think that what the message of the game here is, that the path of the true hero isn't one of power, but of intelligence.
Yeah.
If you run up against the same enemy that Sephiroth once made short work of.
Yeah.
You can't just whip out your sword and do whatever you want and just, swing it twice / cast Bolt 3 or Quake 3
right.
on it. You're up to 2, and you're still like maybe level 30 or so. If you've been leveling up a bunch, you could be more. I'm like level 29 right now. I think I was 28 when I went against Materia Keeper, because I'm just not doing a ton of leveling up because I have somewhat limited time to play this time around.
Well,
I probably did last time, but I like to waste my time more, you might say, because I wasn't playing this academically. In fact, I was definitely escaping academics by playing, which I don't recommend. I think there should be a healthy balance. All things should be equilibrated.
Well, you got to have moderation too, though, like Oscar Wilde says.
Sure. Of course, there needs to be a Dionysian element. But the game, it seems to be saying that what Sephiroth could do with power, and now he's turned evil, and that's a terrible use of power, you need to do with intelligence and savvy and cunning, whereas he's more like an Achillean figure. And this brings me great joy to finally be making this point, because I think the original comment I ever made to you about doing this sort of thing, comparing Achillean to Sephiroth. Sephiroth is like an Achillean figure, the invincible warrior who sacked 23 cities before falling at Troy. It's very similar to Sephiroth, the invincible warrior who sacked everywhere he ever went until falling in a very ignominious defeat, in the same way as Achillean, which we'll soon learn. Well, you have to be more like Odysseus.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be more crafty and cunning, like you're saying. You have to be smarter. And again, that's our second connection to Odysseus, right? Because he's the fire speaker. and the explorer in Dante's Inferno, the one that almost makes it to purgatory. And so are you. You're the fire wielder too, but your fire does no good here. And it's interesting because I think that what that must mean is that the fire of your intellect is not yet up to the task of burning away your own self-deception at home in Nibble.
Right.
Even though there's all this evidence right in front of you. All those dark thoughts in that city, everything everybody was saying to you, people explicitly calling you a liar, Sephiroth still not recognizing or really acknowledging you that much. And there's that destruct material, which I'm not sure what to do with yet. But and then you're going back through this materia cave into Mount Nibble, or the reactor, which again, you want to get through that Jenova door. What is there? You can't get to it. And for all that, you are just not you are not yet ready to face yourself.
Yeah. Well, going along with that, the weapon that you have at this point, that you get like right at the start of the mountain path, is a rune blade, which has double growth, right? And that's to contrast with Sephiroth's Wicked Masamune, which has 0 materia growth. Yes. Well, it wouldn't matter anyway because all his materia is maxed out. So it's like you're at a different point, and in a way, what you have is more valuable than what he has, because what he has is fixed, and what you have is dynamic. And like, as much as you might suffer through a little bit at this point, it's all to your growth, right? And double growth, perhaps. Right. I think a lot of the weapons that you find around Shinra Mansion too are double growth things for like Tifa and Yuffie. I want to say both of those you find like a double growth weapon for them. So that was my party throughout the mountains was those 3, because each of them is growing their materia quickly. They're able to like support each other, right? Which of course is another thing Sephiroth lacks. He doesn't have friends. He doesn't have a party, so to speak. And you do, and that's the ultimate, right? Like that seems to be the ultimate distinction between your heroic exploration and his like nefarious pride, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, and even the fact that he runs around with sort of like a dark Oedipal Freudian fantasy mother who he's trying to merge back with, sort of like somebody trying to return to childhood.
Yeah.
And the childhood naivete as like say an adult and running away from adult responsibility, and thus the idea of death. He, which I think is very much the case with Sephiroth, and was potentially the case also with Achillean, and why Patroclus first had to die for him. That perhaps he questioned his fate with an element of fear. I used to turn up my nose at that idea, but Patroclus explicitly asks him whether he is scared before he goes out there. And he says, no. It's not because of some fate I know about, but he does. And, I question why that is, but Sephiroth doesn't seem to be able to accept this either. And so, whereas you have real people around you and are following a real ideal, he like sort of Peter Pan with Tinkerbell, who's sort of pornographic in her representation, even in the Disney movie. She has like a very short skirt, and she's sort of like, I don't know, got very like adult lady feminine attributes, curves, like not really childhood like companion appropriate, kind of like adolescent fantasy appropriate. And so at least Peterson's idea on that is that she's like the imaginary image of a woman that Peter Pan has instead of a real woman because he refuses to grow up. And I see sort of that with Sephiroth and Jenova, where he has this sort of imaginary mother who's not even his real mother, who is a calamity from the skies, which you could take to be a really bad, stupid thought or an ideology or something like that, a disease of the mind, a calamity of the skies, symbolically speaking, the place of the gods, the place of the archetypes and the thoughts. It strikes me that, he's like trying to live out a fantasy, whereas what Cloud is being led towards is reality, even though it's going to be very painful. It's like Sephiroth is trying to deny the pain of reality through this sort of bombastic, like heaven rhetoric speaking, go to the promised land, go to the place without pain. Well, that seems to be like the primary tyrannical fantasy, right? Let's create the super perfect state where there can be no pain, and then we'll define pain out of existence. And well, yeah, I just want to pause there just because I feel like I threw a lot out there all at once.
Yeah. No, it's super problematic to think of Sephiroth as the one playing out the fantasy, because then I immediately reflect on myself, playing the game because it's Final Fantasy, right? It's like there's definitely an element of that when you take time and attention and put them into the game. There's always like being a Peter Pan, right? Being caught up in the thing that you should have left behind. And I think it all has to do with like what kind of attention you put into it, right? Like what is the end? Is it just like pleasure and like fantasy, or is it trying to understand some kind of deeper theme or purpose, which I think is there. Like I think the game does support a deeper reading. I do think at times like we probably strain it, but that's part of the fun as well. Like there's something there, and the way that you can get at it, I think, is just by exploring it, and just by like not being scared off by that weird will-o'-the-wisp, right, sort of feeling. I guess with the Materia Keeper here, in a way, that reminded me of the very first boss battle also. And so it's like there's an element of sort of like throughout Nibelheim, you're obviously like revisiting your past, and I think the player in a way is revisiting their past too, because you're fighting a creature that sort of resembles that very first boss battle, and you're in a place that's a reactor once more, right? So for all that this journey you've been on, you're sort of like retracing. And obviously, like for us playing the game again, everything has in that element of retracing. And so it's a matter of kind of like coming to grips with that. That seems to be part of the challenge of this whole project.
Yeah, and just to support your point of the game, sort of not only playing with you, but also suggesting that it itself is a waste of time. There's that one creature from random boss battles that sort of stares you down in order to freeze you. It's
man, that's so annoying. Yeah,
it's so annoying, and it's so creepy too. And those things move in such a weird dance-like way, like they're hypnotizing you. And they remind me also of they're very similar to me to the Dementors.
Yeah.
Harry Potter, that kind of absorb good things from you. Happy emotion though, rather than time, or HP, but maybe HP. These creatures sort of are vampires on you in that way. But that, just to kind of jump back really quickly, did you run into that nasty opponent in the Shinra mansion called Yin Yang?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. What an annoying fight. Every time I hit him, he would take 20 seconds of my time leaning back.
Exactly.
Coming forward. He was horrifying for that reason. I mean, I finally saw, just going back through the mansion one more time today because I was behind, how many of the creatures there are representatives of time or ghosts from the past, the pumpkin ghosts. There's a pendulum. There's the guy on the blade pendulum. Like that place is an image of like the repressed contents of your unconscious, or like your repressed memories, that it is only a matter of time before they gush up through you. I mean, I just thought they nailed it in that Shinra mansion. The fact that when Vincent wakes up, he says, "Your nightmare has only begun," and Cloud agrees to that. It's like, yes. And that is the new feeling, because the closer you come to the truth, you're like Oedipus at this point. The closer you're coming to something that's going to be terrible. And so perhaps we can get Aristotelian on this. And Aristotle says that Oedipus is a superior play, or of the best sort, because the turn of fate, and these are two aspects of tragedy, happens at the same time as the big reveal.
Nice, yeah.
And so the big reveal and recognition scene also results in, or reveals, the turn of fate of Oedipus, from great superhero king, best of men, to absolute worst and lowest of men, full of crimes, not virtuous at all, unworthy of sight and being cited, the opposite of a hero, the great anti-hero, who brings about his own doom through his own cunning.
Yeah.
Like the anti-Odysseus. And that's you right now as Cloud. With
Exactly.
your clouded eyes.
Now, in that respect, it's good that the nightmare is just beginning, right? If this was the end of the game, it would be really unsatisfying.
Yeah, it'd be like a Silent Hill.
It'd be a heck of a tragedy. But I think even the Oedipus story doesn't end there, right? That's one of the plays of this cycle.
Right.
And there's a kind of transcendence that comes about by the end of the cycle. I don't remember that much of Oedipus at Colonus, but I remember it being like really, really awesome. So I think, like and I think that's sort of the way that the game is structured as well, right? Like you have these kind of self-contained episodes, each of which has a bit of a trajectory to it, but taken together, they certainly can be read as representing your you, the player, you, the character, whatever, your ability to sort of like play a bigger game, right? And learn from all these episodes, take things from them metaphorically and literally in the course of the game, and grow, right? And like develop these relationships which are transcendent ultimately, or at least that seems to be a possibility.
Yeah, and that's interesting because it is through encountering the imminent problems and sufferings of life that one attains a real transcendent relationship. Perhaps one in embodying the path of the hero amongst others is thus in the promised land, or in sort of that state of Aristotelian inergeia, or that sort of effortless state that the Buddhists or the Taoists talk about, of just motion without consciousness, or the opposite of what happens when man falls. He has to work. It's as if you are living the best life can possibly be by facing your suffering with others and not settling for delusion in the way that Sephiroth does. Yeah, you were saying something.
No, yeah, I definitely agree that there's a kind of an alternative or another angle on that fundamental fall redemption theme that is going on here. And I think if Vince were here, he would probably be able to say more about the Buddhist side of things to that. But yeah, the Taoist, like action without action, or the sage or whatever, that does seem to be a kind of this game seems to be a kind of picture of that in a way, because you're so like free in a way from restraints, and the way that you can get there is by going through them. As you're free of them by the end of the game, like you're the strongest thing around, but you only get there by passing through those trials.
Yeah, and there's just it's interesting. There's an ethereal element to you that I think makes a game like this perfect to being young. Because though you can die, you don't have to deal with your everyday needs, really. You're not eating. You do sleep for health, but it doesn't take much time.
Right.
And you don't really have to suffer the time that it takes really to grow. That sort of happens. Sorry, I'm sort of losing it. If you want to finish the thought, it's just if you grasped it, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, that this game really dramatizes it in a fun and dynamic way. But it's a very difficult thing to try to capture exactly, like for me at least, exactly how this portrayal embodies elements of a Judeo-Christian story, and yet also seems to appeal to, on the one hand, like pagan virtues, like those talked about in Greek drama, or on the other hand, like more traditional Eastern stories, whether Buddhist, Taoist, what have you. Like, there's so much. I think this game. I think that's part of what makes it so rich, right? There's so much that you can sort of reach through playing this, reach by way of playing this game, explicitly reference a lot of it, but some of it does, right? Like that weird character that takes so long to like let you attack down in the basement of the Shinra mansion. I think it's called Yang,
Yin
right?
Yang.
It's like
I think it's
called
Yang.
Yang. What is that about? Like that's just a weird gratuitous reference to this whole world of like metaphysics and yeah. So the game just, it opens up all these extended ruminations, I suppose, and I think it's really worth exploring them. We can only do so much as we're playing through it, but I think we're at least like highlighting and touching upon some of these things that are definitely there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's no accident that we hit a mountain where we can get some serious reflection time. It's a long map getting through that. After going through Nibble, we have a good long time to think about what we've just learned. And, well, I think you're right. And then we come to, finally, after defeating Materia Keeper, the rocket launch space area. Where, again, we'll see somebody pursuing either delusions or dreams.
Yes.
And, and Vincent wakes up from a nightmare, though. Is he waking up to the nightmare, or is he waking up from the nightmare? Because it seems like he doesn't give me peace wherever he goes. He's a weird, elegant sort of creature. Yes.
Our Vincent Valentine and our Sid Highwind. He's, I guess, the last character, unless you haven't got Yuffie yet. He's the last character to join the party. So
I need to go get her with Big Guard and Beta. I'm going to take a little shopping trip with enemy skill.
You might be better waiting just until you get not the Highwind. You don't get it yet, but the tiny Bronco.
That's what. Yeah.
You can sort of paddle around and get to places a lot easier. It's worth making that detour. But yeah, so for next time we'll talk about Rocket Town and Sid and his whole absurd past.
Yeah, and he'll join our cadre of woebegone heroes or ne'er-do-well, not ne'er-do-well heroes, but who would have thunk it heroes.
Yeah.
Do you have the term? I'm missing it. It's like I can almost
Misfit.
That's right. Misfit. Yeah. It really is a misfit bunch, like the Island of Misfit toys. They're all missing something. It's something crucial too, and I mean, it's amazing to what extent we're willing to forgive them. Like Barrett is a terrorist, right? Who helps to kill his best friend, who does ultimately commit suicide by himself. But and you're kind of a terrorist too, so much so that you won't even recognize it, or maybe something else. I don't know, but it's like, Barrett is responsible for many deaths. And yet, he's just my party member right now.
Well, yeah. I mean, one man's terrorist, right? It's and it's like all of that stuff is, in a way, you get through certain parts of the story, and you sort of just like move on and accept them, and that comes so naturally to you as the player of the game. But it's only kind of later, as you think about it all, the gravity of it comes home.
I think that's sort of what the music's trying to convey to us, that whereas we bear like sort of that nervousness and unease of trying to get them through these enemy battles, where we're responsible for that active element. They're responsible for sort of bearing the emotional cost, because like in the world itself that they are in, like they're obviously not monsters around every corner that they have to fight randomly. These, I think, are like sort of like the traumas from the past that they have to integrate into themselves to become more psychologically fit or adapted to reality, that are hitting them in the everyday, sort of like they hit us in the everyday, right? The things we need to face that are part of our everyday, that bring up issues from the past that we haven't fixed, that they get worse when we refuse to look at them, but we have to fight them, and we have to fight through them in order to, you know, get to the next place in our life, get to the next point of the narrative.
Right. Yeah, if you were writing this as a story, you wouldn't include on every page, like, then they fought another green dragon. That would like be a really boring story. But yeah, somehow through the medium of the game, I agree that that's sort of the implied sense of what's going on story-wise here.
I mean, just the fact that the enemies, I was just realizing that it really does do a lot to analyze what enemies you're running to on the map. And like the fact that you run into like sort of vampiric or ghost-like ones down in Shinra, just like you run into like an absorbing one that absorbs like what you are, just like the game is absorbing your time in Nibble, is very interesting, I think, telling about what's going on there, or what the idea is supposed to be. And like you're getting absorbed in your thoughts. It's hurting. Yeah, go on.
No, just agreeing. Like the meanings though are sort of metaphorical and not simply on the literal level at this point.
Yeah. All right. Well, another avenue trespassed down. Another side quest or save point reached. There we go.
Yes. All right. I'm looking forward to getting the fight with Palmer is just hilarious, and Sid's whole story is moving in a way, but just I find it pretty silly, frankly. So I'm looking forward to kind of dissecting that next time.
Okay, I can't wait. I can't wait to infinity and beyond.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy.
You too. Bye.